Hello, this is the sad Cinderella story of a poor girl from the early Middle Ages who rose to become a queen and had to suffer through a betrayal until her death. Welcome to History Tower. From enemies to friends. This true story takes place in the Frankish Empire in the 6th century of the early Middle Ages. But where even was the Frankish Empire and who ruled it? The Franks were one of many Germanic tribes in the 3rd century that frightened the Roman armies. They earned a reputation as monsters due to them being huge and pale, wearing long knotted hair on the front that was shaved in the nape. Instead of beards, the Frankish men wore mustaches. They were dressed in skimpy tunics. On the battlefield, the Franks became known as deadly opponents due to their tactic of throwing axes with short wooden handles at one signal to shatter the shields of the disciplined formations of the Romans and murder their enemies. When the Romans developed the fear of fighting the Franks, they instead offered them positions as soldiers for the Roman Empire. The Frankish Empire. In the 6th century, the Franks ruled a part of the wreckage of the Roman Empire, whose splendor they still admired and imitated. They of course also intermarried with the Romans, did business with them and adopted some of their customs. For instance, the Franks ate grain imported from North Africa and bathed in heated pools. They enjoyed to drink spring water supplied through the pre-Roman invention of aqueducts. Nevertheless, the Roman aqueducts became famous for their curved arches and beautiful stable constructions. The Frankish Empire at one time stretched from the North Sea to the Pyrenees, the famous mountain range between present-day France and Spain. It expanded during hundreds of years, but its territory lay in what is nowadays known as France and Spain, the Netherlands, Belgium, a part of Germany, the Czech Republic, Austria, Slovenia, Croatia, and about half of Italy. So altogether, a huge part of Western Europe. The 4 Merovingian brother kings. Our story begins in the year 561, when King Clothar I died and therefore divided his empire between his 4 sons, who would try to outmaneuver each other to grab as much power, prestige and territory as they could. Why? Because Frankish kings were expected to be conquerors, to feel masculine, even at the expense of peace and rationality. The oldest of these 4 brother kings was Charibert, who received the territories Neustria, Aquitaine, and Novum Populania, including Paris. His territory lies in modern France. The 4 queens of King Charibert. Queen Ingoberga. King Charibert married Ingoberga, who bore him a daughter called Bertha. The royal couple was of course expected to receive a son to continue the line of succession in this hereditary monarchy due to their Christian and therefore patriarchal worldviews. Princess Bertha nevertheless became Queen of Kent later in her life and was canonized as a saint due to her dedication to Christianize Anglo-Saxon England in the 6th century. Unfortunately for Queen Ingoberga, the king's interest shifted to the 2 young women in her service, who were the daughters of a wool worker. The contemporary historian Gregor von Tours even states that King Charibert was in love with both of them. Queen Ingoberga tried to humiliate the 2 women by showing her husband the king how the father of the 2 sisters was weaving the royal wool. Contrary to her expectations, the king became angry at his queen and divorced her soon afterwards. Queen Merofleda. King Charibert married one of the two daughters he had admired, whose name was Merofleda. It is unclear why this marriage didn't last, but what stands out is that even women of low social status could rise to the rank of a queen. This had at least two practical reasons. The first reason is that it did not matter if a Frankish king fell in love with a lady of low ranking, he could still make her his queen. The second reason is that if too many sons were born to different wives, after the death of the king, these widows would have no political influence with powerful families and no armies to fight for their claim to the throne. A Cinderella rise. Queen Theudechild. His third queen became a shepherd's daughter called Theudechild, sometimes also called Theodogilda. This name is derived from two old High German words. Diot or Fiot means the people and Hildja means the battle or the warrior. Therefore, Theudechild's name meant fighter from the people or fighter for the people. This name would do justice to her courage. The beginning of her royal love story has not been handed down. Perhaps Theudechild had been a young servant at court, just like the second queen Merofleda, the woolworker's daughter before her. Despite Theudechild's lowly status as a shepherd's daughter, she caught the eye of King Charibert, who decided to marry her. This royal marriage probably felt like a spectacular rise for Theudechild. Better yet, she fulfilled the royal couple's expectations by becoming pregnant. Her aging husband was relieved. She gave the kingdom a male heir, and this should have been her greatest triumph after her wedding, but the baby boy was, quote, no sooner born than buried, according to the chronicler Gregor von Tours. The baby prince was buried immediately after his birth. The royal couple must have been devastated. For Theudechild, it also meant that the secure position as the mother of the heir to the throne had eluded her. None of his wives had yet come so close to giving him an heir. Queen Marcovefa. Queen Theudechild probably expected to return to the king's bed soon after her recovery to try again, but because of his fickle character, he turned to another lady of the court, his former love, the second daughter of the woolworker, who was a nun. She was called Marcovefa. This was a scandal because marrying the sibling of a former spouse was considered to be incestuous, and marrying a nun was forbidden. Another important factor was that the church had decided to forbid bishops to be active in bed and to start a family, because their offspring inherited their worldly goods instead of the church, which upset the church. Therefore, the church excommunicated bishops who were active with their wives, because from their point of view, condoning divorce would have gone too far. King Charibert's marriage to a nun was therefore a problematic decision in the ever-so-tolerant eyes of the church. After Charibert had refused to end his marriage, the king and his new queen were excommunicated. He became the first Merovingian king to be excommunicated. Due to an epidemic outbreak, his new queen died. Soon afterwards, King Charibert rode out of Paris to one of his villas near the French wine city Bordeaux, where he allegedly died from a heart attack or an illness during a hunting trip in 567 at around 50 years of age. He was buried in unconsecrated ground at Plavia Castellum, a former Roman military stronghold, without any royal pomp or ceremony. His 3 surviving brothers would have to negotiate which part of Charibert's territory each of them would receive. Queen Theudechild's plan. The former Queen Theudechild, who had been cast aside after her stillbirth, had followed this development and reacted quickly. Since the king's last marriage was not recognized by the church, Theudechild could now lay claim to the kingdom as the lawful royal dowager. The king's treasure was kept near her bedchamber, which was very useful to pay for political relationships and favors. Theudechild had all of the king's coins, plates, silvers, and chalices. Someone, perhaps some palace guards and loyal courtiers, must have helped her to move and hide the huge royal treasure to her residence, as she couldn't have hauled it away by herself at night when no one noticed. Although she received some support to rule as queen, ultimately it wasn't enough without a living son. So she planned her next step and put everything on one card. Theudechild sent her messenger to the second oldest Merovingian king, Guntram, in the adjacent territory Burgundy, who was the brother of her deceased husband Charibert. She sent him a marriage proposal, and then she waited for his response. King Guntram's response. King Guntram gave her messengers the following reply: "She may come to me and bring her treasure with her. I will receive her and I will give her an honorable place among my people. She will hold a higher position at my side than she ever did with my brother, who has died recently." When she heard King Guntram's response, Theudechild was overjoyed to start this new chapter in her life that seemed to promise her security, a royal lifestyle, and perhaps even love. Together with her retinue and the royal treasure, she rode south to King Guntram's city, Chalon-sur-Saône. During her journey, she had probably prepared herself for her wedding and would have been treated with absolute respect. Deception and betrayal. King Guntram welcomed Theudechild and appraised her treasure, whereupon he said, "It is better that these treasures should be held in my control than that they should follow this woman who was unworthy of my brother's bed." He seized almost everything of this huge treasure and left just a little bit for Theudechild, from which she should live. This betrayal must have felt terrible and overwhelming, but it didn't end there. What Guntram had meant when he had called Theudechild unworthy wasn't her low social status, but her ambition, because after his deception he married a former slave of one of his ex-wives. As King Guntram resented powerful women, he made sure that Theudechild would never get power again, in a method that was typical during that time. He packed her off to a nunnery at Arles, in today's south of France. A stuck queen. Why was Theudechild's forced residence in the nunnery at Arles like a punishment? Many monasteries, including the one in Arles, followed a strict code that had been derived from the book Rule for Virgins, which had of course been written by a Christian man. This book not only dictated the foods women in the monastery were allowed to eat, but also which fabrics and colors they were supposed to wear. Therefore, Theudechild always had to wear white robes of ordinary cloth or linen. The only decorations she was allowed to show were white or black crosses without jewels, pearls, or gold. As queen, she had had servants to dress her and arrange her hair, but in the monastery at Arles, she didn't have any. It's reported that she barely endured the fasts and vigils that she was forced to follow. Perhaps the worst aspect was that she was never allowed to visit the outside world. For in exchange with priests and tradespeople, Theudechild was veiled and behind a wooden grill. Escape plan. Soon Theudechild found a secret pipeline to send out messages, which shows how smart and courageous she was, because that was absolutely forbidden, with severe consequences. She was finally able to smuggle a message out to a certain Visigoth, probably someone she was already so familiar with that she trusted him with her life. She let him know that if he would carry her off to Spain and marry her there, she would escape from the nunnery with what wealth remained to her and set off with him without the slightest hesitation. This unnamed Visigoth immediately promised her to help her escape. Theudechild would have been relieved, but yet anxious to escape her prison. She packed her remaining treasures in bundles, and she bundled her courage to slip out of the convent. The finale. As she was about to escape, the vigilant abbess caught Theudechild. The abbess ordered her to be severely and mercilessly beaten and locked up in her cell. There are two translations of the Latin sentence by Gregor von Tours that describe what happened to Theudechild afterwards. In this state, she lived to her dying day, worn by sufferings above the common measure. Perhaps the saddest translation is this: there she remained until her dying day, suffering awful anguish.